Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube, and it's time, Sam, for our conference championship preview show, and then a lot more. More than just the preview show.
Pro Bowl preview?
Yeah, we're going to go through the Pro Bowl.
Sweet.
My kids are waiting for the Pro Bowl. They're all excited for it. I'm trying to...
They must be the only people in America.
Trying to smarten them up, but, let them go. Let them live. Watch the Pro Bowl. No, we're going to preview the two games. We're going to get our guy Ari Meirov on here. We're going to talk all sorts of news. Trent Baalke fired. Raiders.
Which we almost predicted yesterday. We kind of got there to that conclusion. We're like,
like, what's he doing here?
If you're willing to fire the guy and everybody's saying they don't really want to work with him, you might have to do that sooner rather than later.
I kind of went the other way. I said, Baalke has Shad Khan's ear, and you can't mess with that.
Yeah.
But, we'll break that all down with Ari in a little bit. We got some Shouty Shows showing up today on our Thursday show.
People were upset that we didn't have a Shouty Show segment of the year in our awards ceremony yesterday.
We could always just add it in at some point.
Always add it. Then we don't have to get dressed in tuxedos again.
Yeah, I mean,
can't have that.
Trying to get your money's worth. So it's all brought to you by PrizePicks. We'll also have our PrizePicks lineup a little bit later today, yours and mine, for championship weekend. Don't forget, you can download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code, check the mic. You get $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, man, you ready?
Yeah.
2 games to preview. Let's do this in under 3 hours. We got this.
Easy, sort of.
It all starts in the NFC Championship, Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock. The Washington Commanders, the Philadelphia Eagles, third matchup of the season for Washington and Philadelphia. Eagles favored by 6.5 here. They split the season series. The second game, of course, no Jalen Hurts for the Eagles for the majority of the game, but it was a great back-and-forth game between Washington and Philadelphia. I think the first matchup kind of felt like, hey, Washington is competitive, but they're not as good as some of the best teams. But they beat the Eagles down the stretch, even without Hurts.
Yep. And
obviously have proven that they belong among the best teams in the NFC.
Well, the first game it followed the pattern that a number of Eagles games have followed this year, where it's been close for 2 or 3 quarters, and then Philadelphia's run game leans on the opponent in the second half, particularly late, and Saquon breaks off a couple of big runs, and boom, suddenly it's become a relatively comfortable win, where for most of the game it was a tight, relatively back-and-forth affair. They did that to Washington. They did it to the Rams. They've done it to a few teams this season. The second one, though, okay, you didn't have Jalen Hurts. Kenny Pickett got hurt with his ribs. So it was a Philadelphia team, obviously, without their starting quarterback. But the more sort of relevant part, I think, was like Washington's offense did real damage. It put up points against this Vic Fangio defense. It's been so amazing. And now the big X factor heading into this game is Jalen Hurts came out of the divisional round with a knee injury, and we have no idea what he's going to look like. Like the division game itself, the question mark was his concussion, and he'd been in the concussion protocol for a couple of weeks, and we didn't know whether that was going to be a thing. He got cleared. He was good to go. But then he gets this knee injury, and now that's more difficult, I think, because it's not a sort of binary, will he play, yes, no. Almost certainly, I think he plays. The question is, how healthy is he? Because Jalen Hurts is not just, this is not like Patrick Mahomes and an ankle injury, and it's like, how much can he work, how much can he move, but he can operate fine, no problem. Like Jalen Hurts' running game is a huge part of his game overall. If he can't do that, remember, in the division round, like they were reticent to put him in there on the push play just because of the knee, right? They eventually did it right at the end when they had to have it, but like if he's limited in what he can do, I think suddenly this becomes almost like a coin flip.
Yeah, part of what makes – so you mentioned Mahomes when he's injured, and I made the point that, hey, sometimes when he's hurt, he just chooses to win from the pocket.
He just
more
adjusts.
Often.
It's like, right,
gets rid of the ball quickly, and it's more of a quick-hitting passing attack, and he picks his spots when he's going to run around. Can Hurts do that, right? And again, this isn't like, hear me properly. It's not like Jalen Hurts can't make any throws from the pocket, right? You still have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. It is a beautiful trio, and Barkley coming out of the backfield. So it's all possible. But can Hurts do that, 20 to 25, 30 times in the game over and over again, win from the pocket, quick game, still take your shots downfield? Because there's a lot of plays in the Eagles passing attack and a Jalen Hurts passing attack, no matter who the offensive coordinator is, that it's just longer developing, and then he just doesn't hit the first or second read, buys time, and tries to make a play. If that's limited at all, that limits the offense just a little bit. So is that a little bit more Saquon? Is that a little bit more, I don't know, some designed shot plays that are trying to get the ball out of Jalen Hurts' hands, quick play action, throw it up to A.J. Brown, whatever it might be. There'll be some one-on-ones against Washington, and some of those matchups will be interesting to me. Mike Sanderstill, who's been outstanding, and Marshawn Lattimore on the outside. Since having Lattimore, Commanders playing a lot more man coverage, playing a lot more single high, and that gives you opportunities. When you play single high, usually gives you an extra man in the box to stop the run, which they're going to need today in this weekend against Saquon and the Eagles, but it also gives you the one-on-ones on the outside. I could see Washington, who has the third worst EPA per play against the run this year, trying to say, hey, go ahead, Jalen Hurts, beat us with the pass game as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, they become, if he can't run, like if he isn't a legitimate threat to carry the ball, not just on the push play, but like generally, like the first big run, the first touchdown last week, Jalen Hurts was the guy that took off and made that play. If that is off the table with this knee injury, and I don't know if it will be, like this is the thing, we don't know. If that's off the table, then the game plan for Washington, I think, is extremely simple. Like you just stack the box, you load up to stop Saquon Barkley, you sacrifice the one-on-one matchups on the outside, and you say, okay, if those guys can beat us, fine. Like let it happen. If they can win that way, cool. They will have more confidence in holding up that way. And yeah, it's risky, but Jalen Hurts right now, I don't think has done enough as a passer this season to say that shouldn't be the game plan. Yeah, you're always vulnerable when that is the game plan of giving up a big play to A.J. Brown, to Devontae Smith, to Dallas Goedert, but it's still the game plan. Like, at the moment, you'll get gashed by Saquon if you don't load up to stop him. So stop that. Jalen Hurts isn't the threat to run, so you are basically forcing them to say, all right, win one-on-one on the outside consistently, like win enough to be able to put up points and keep pace with our offense, which we have confidence in will make the plays.
The other thing I'm going to mention a couple different times here, and again, it's not to take anything away from what's happened to this point, but the stat I keep mentioning about Saquon having 20% of the 50-plus yard throws, and I'll say this about Jaden Daniels throwing the ball down the field. 2 pinpoint downfield throws from Jaden Daniels against the Lions. When you not rely on those, but in any given game, those could be a just miss. Saquon might not have a 50-plus yard run in this game, right? He might be the guy that has a whole bunch of the 2, 3, 4-yard carries and not actually break one. Can you rely on that big playability if you're the Eagles, especially if Washington is selling out against the run? So remember, when you sell out, you probably do better against the run. But if you miss one gap,
right,
that is the Saquon factor, right? If you blow one gap, if you have one guy get blocked and he sees it and he hits the hole, he's taken it to the house. So there's like a little boom or bust, I think, to what the run game could look like for Philadelphia, both the way Washington plays it and the way Saquon can always take it to the house.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is true for Saquon. It's been true for Derrick Henry for his career. It was true for Adrian Peterson, particularly in that 2012 season. Like, just because you're stacking the box with 8-9 guys doesn't mean that's actually going to prevent the run game. It will prevent like the median carry being significant. You'll probably limit him to quite a low number of yards most of the time. But the problem is if and when you screw something up, and it could be as simple as a guy's in the right gap and just misses the tackle because it's Saquon or it's Adrian Peterson or whatever, suddenly there's no contingency. Like, there's one safety basically back there after that, so it can go to the house immediately. So that's an element as well. Even if you sell out to stop the run, you're loading up the box. Saquon can make one move and turn that into a big play. A guy can miss a tackle, it's a big play. And how, like, what the distribution of those are, right? Do you get a couple of those in the game? If so, you're stopping the run did nothing. You might have won a drive or two here or there, but they also put up 14 points with those plays. If you get one of them, maybe it's worth it. If you get none of them, it's a great job. Like, you stuffed the run, he didn't manage to break one, and you force them to be one-dimensional. So it is still a gamble, even if that is the game plan.
And the other piece of this, too, shotgun runs when Jalen Hurts, is a threat to keep it.
Yeah,
what if he's not a threat, right? So that changes the math, right? We've said this a lot. What does the QB run do? It's essentially a free block, right? Because someone has to account for that guy. that is a big part of why Saquon Barkley's had the great season he's had. It's a big reason why Derrick Henry has had the great season that he's had, because they're now paired with legitimate runners at quarterback. Even Saquon, when he had Daniel Jones, was paired with a legitimate runner at quarterback, and that only really worked that 1 year where Jones was running a lot more. He had the 20th most rushing yards for any quarterback in NFL history back in 2022. And that's a big factor, right? So as soon as, we see where Jalen Hurts' mobility is, I mean, I don't know if you just want to like give him a keeper right off the top just to kind of, steal 5 yards and say, hey, look, we could still do this, right? He's a threat and sets up, handing it off for the rest of the game. But the injury aspect is a huge part of this. I don't think it affects the push. I think by this time he'll be okay with the tush push. They would have, if they didn't have the Lane Johnson false start, it would have worked fine last week.
Yeah.
Philly. Other side of the ball, we've raved about Jaden Daniels, the way he's taking care of the ball, not taking sacks. The offensive line has been okay, right? They did give up a lot of pressure against Tampa Bay in the first matchup. And with the way Philly can rush the passer, I think it's going to come down to, taking care of the ball and avoiding those negative plays that Jaden Daniels has been so good at avoiding throughout this entire run.
Yeah, that's a mismatch, right? Like as much as Washington's offensive line has held up pretty well over the course of the season, they are overmatched by Philadelphia's defensive line.
Samuel Cosmi out for the season at right guard, maybe their best offensive lineman.
Definitely their best offensive lineman.
And so now you lose him. We saw what Jalen Carter did down the stretch. And as you mentioned, that was like fake stunts, right? That was him setting things up and just destroying blocking schemes. That's going to be a challenge, I think.
And I was surprised that losing Cosmi in the game last week didn't have a significant effect. Like as soon as he went down, it was like, that could be a problem. Like you said, their best offensive lineman, he goes down, and it wasn't really a factor for the rest of that Lions game. I think it'll be a bigger deal this week just because of who they're going up against. So, anytime you have a team where they have a theoretical weakness on paper, but it hasn't been that much of a weakness week to week, you should have the tendency of saying, well, why would it show up this week? The reason it might is because you are going up against one of the best units in the league in terms of Philadelphia's defensive line. Like, that is the type of group that can find that weakness and expose it in a way that other teams weren't able to do. So I do think that will be a concern for Washington. They hide the offensive line because of everything they can do with Jaden Daniels and, read option looks and quarterback keepers and RPOs and all this kind of stuff. It's still there, though, as like an underlying crack in the foundation.
Just want to make a quick announcement here that you and I are going to be in the Discord on Sunday before the games, about 2:15 Eastern. So it's 3 o'clock Eastern start for this Washington and Philadelphia game, but we'll be in there and answering all your questions and hanging out in the Discord, which is we'll have all the links in the YouTube description here if you're not already a part of the Discord, but make sure you're in there, and we'll just hang out, do a little Q&A leading up to game time.
Yep.
What else? To me, the Washington run game too, I mean, I'll repeat it again, even though the game flow wasn't exactly like this the other day, but Washington's ability to put together long drives and shorten the game and just lean on you, and a lot of that's Jaden Daniels, right? It's like, hey, 3rd and 4th and 2, we're going to roll him out, and we're going to run QB sweeps, and we're going to take advantage of his running ability. And he's been very effective against the blitz and having answers, and just the quick passing game has been outstanding. So the sustained drives of the Washington Commanders. Eagles are still number 1 in EPA per play against the run. They're one of the best pass defense. I mean, they're one of the best all-around defenses.
Yeah.
They are without Nakobe Dean, though, and I know, they just won a game without him last week. But the combination of Dean at linebacker,
Oren Burks, your guy.
It's
his time to shine.
I'll tell you my Oren Burks story again in a minute here, but Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean was a great 1-2 punch, especially against the run. Oren Burks, the story there was like the very first game I ever graded for college, 2014, when we were at PFF. He was like the guy that stood out, free safety at the time for Temple, if I remember. Was it Temple?
Don't know.
No. Was he Vandy?
Yes, Vandy.
Vandy. Sorry, it was Vandy Temple. And I was confusing with PJ, who you hated.
He did hate PJ.
Temple. I was like, Oren Burks is going to be a player. He was like on my watch list for the rest of eternity.
Oren Burks is your Jason Babin. I saw Jason Babin as a rookie look amazing, and they waited like a decade for him to be good.
All of our references are just 10 years old. They're just 10 years old.
It's more than 10 years old. When the hell did Jason
Babin's like 15 years now. But we're dating ourselves.
I'm just saying, every now and again, you just got to wait 10 years, and your guy shows up.
Well, this is the year that the 6-year-old takes. The classes of 2017 and 18 between Sam Darnold and Mac Hollins and Ardarius Washington. There are players all across the league making an impact that we loved, or at least I loved, 6-7 years ago, and they're finally coming due this year.
We're only a couple of years away from Travis Fulgham showing back up and
Travis Fulgham
picking up where he left off.
Anyone else that
1 month?
Vernon Hargrave's breakout season coming soon here.
Oh, Vernon Hargraves.
He's the biggest miss in the history of our lives.
I don't understand how he wasn't good. I don't. There are times, like, this is the thing, right? The draft,
slam dunk prospect.
We'll get into this when we get to the draft. But, like, there are guys every year where it's like, there's just no way. This guy has everything. Like, he is the complete prospect where there are no flaws. There's no reason he shouldn't be good. And then you get to the NFL, not only is he not good, but he's absolute garbage. Like,
every potential role.
Sometimes in hindsight, you look back and you go, okay, here's quite obviously what we overlooked or, didn't pay enough attention to or minimized as a potential weakness or whatever. Like, there are other guys where you look back and you're like, I still don't get it. I even with the benefit of hindsight, I don't understand why this guy wasn't good. That's Vernon Hargreaves.
It is. All right, here's the other factor. I mean, look, last week.
No, hang on. The run game you mentioned.
Yeah.
Like, we said that going into the Detroit game, right? Like, Washington, when they have a run game, that offense is virtually impossible to stop because Jaden Daniels is playing so well as a total threat at quarterback. But, as a passer, he can do enough. As a runner, he does enough. So if they have a baseline run game, this offense is incredible. They haven't had that for a lot of the season. And we were saying, actually, you can go back quite a way, like week 13 or something was the last time Brian Robinson had, I think, 100 yards or whatever the cutoff was. Last week, he didn't have 100. He had 70-something, but Austin Eckler had 40-something. Like, as a team, they rushed for like 180 yards against Detroit. Again, it's still that I think is a big thing for Washington. If they can have a legitimate running game that can give them a consistent, 4.5 yards per attempt on the ground, when you factor in Jaden Daniels and his ability to pick up 4 and 2, 4 and 3, that's huge. Can they do that against Philadelphia's defensive front? I would find it kind of unlikely, but if they can, then you're in a world where, as good as Philadelphia's defense is, like, they're going to find it very difficult to get Washington off the field.
And so then we get into the parts of the game that are difficult to measure and difficult to predict, turnovers and all that, right? So one thing we didn't mention that I saw a lot of other people mention was in last week's divisional round, all 4 teams that won were outgained in just pure yardage, right? And some of that was just game flow. Some of that was like, hey, the Lions are playing from behind and putting up a lot of yards, and they did steal a 66-yard, one-off touchdown in there. But it was an interesting dynamic because other than the Texans, most of the winning teams also won the turnover battle. Now, I mentioned this the other day too. You're going to see a lot of these stats like this is the first time where a team never punted and this and that and this is unbelievable. It's like, well, yeah, teams are going for it on 4th down more than ever. So you're going to get more of those types of stats. And so we should probably count 4th down failures as turnovers, right? So they might not go to the turnover category, so to speak, but you're turning over the ball without getting points, right? You're giving it to the other team without getting points and without earning the field position of a punt. It's what these games are going to come down to, right? We know the Eagles are going to always steal a couple 4th and 1s with the push. It's going to come down to this. Like Dan Quinn, if Dan Quinn goes 2 for 5 on 4th downs, they're probably not going to win. If they go 4 for 5, 5 for 5, 5 for 6 on 4th downs, Washington has a chance to pull this upset.
We're seeing, I think, like a return. This idea of the league is always cyclical, right? It goes in cycles of various things that go one way and then they come back and blah, blah. I think we're seeing a return to high leverage plays swinging the game dramatically in one direction or the other. Like, you go way back to the 60s or whatever, you're talking about, like, passing was incredibly dangerous. The interception rate on passes was like through the roof, like Joe Namath. This is why people look at Joe Namath's stats. And they're like, how is this dude in the Hall of Fame that he threw like an interception every other pass or whatever? It's ridiculous because you're judging it by modern standards where quarterbacks complete 65, 70% of their passes, rarely put the ball in harm's way. And you can have stats like Lamar Jackson this year where your touchdown to interception ratio is like 10-1, right? An elite touchdown to interception ratio back in the day was like 2-1, right? So it was very, very different. Then quarterbacks got so efficient passing the ball that it sort of, those high leverage plays disappeared in that regard. Defenses are fighting back a little bit with the mastery of the peanut punch, the ability to force fumbles in the process of a tackle, just coming in with a punch right on the football, spitting it loose that way. The other way we're seeing a return to these high leverage plays is that increase in fourth down aggressiveness, right? Generally, it's a productive thing for the offense, but what it is doing is increasing the number of these turnovers, as you said, not turnovers on downs. It's increasing the frequency of those because you're not going to get all of them. And the ones you don't are big high leverage plays going in the opposite direction. So we'd almost gotten too efficient with everything in the last few years. And I think now we're starting to see it come back a bit where it's still really efficient generally, but you're at least increasing the number of plays where it's like, boom, stop, other team has the ball again.
And I say this a lot too, which is when those fail, like if you go for it on the opposing 45 and don't get it, you're giving up really good field position. Those so if your failures come at the wrong time, it does set up the other team, right? I saw Nick Saban talking about this on McAfee, and he was kind of giving this, old school, like, you never tell me what's going to happen if we don't get it and stuff. It's like, well, we kind of do. It is risky, right? I mean, it's like
what'll happen.
It's
in there.
You're increasing win probability if you get it, but you're decreasing win probability quite a bit if you don't get it. It is by nature higher leverage.
It's baked into the calculation. To me, I always think of it like poker or blackjack, right? Like it's going by the book. It is the way to maximize the returns in these situations. But that doesn't mean you won't catch a crappy card and a bad beat and lose, right? That's the nature of it. Just because you went in with the better hand doesn't mean the other guy isn't going to hit the 35% that he has and you lose. It didn't mean your decision was wrong to go for it. Like assuming, you're not able to actually read what his cards are, you're basically playing the math. You played the math correctly. It doesn't mean you're going to get the result every time. So that's the way I see all these decisions, is that the sensible way to play this is to assume that you're not some sort of soothsaying savant and you can tell by the way the wind's blowing what way each one of these plays is going to work. Like if we assume everybody is not able to do that, because that appears to be the evidence, like nobody is able to just draft better than everybody else. The best way to approach that is to simply play the odds. And if you play the correct side of the odds every time, long term, you win more. Short term, you might get screwed, but that's kind of the decision.
And I don't know what the updated fourth down numbers are for Washington, but they've been something like 80%. And the analyst in me looks at that both ways, right? We've described why that's the case. Well, they have the mobile quarterback, and they've called some outstanding plays to take advantage of Jaden Daniels' running ability. And I will repeat for probably the third straight week now, the 2019 Ravens had a very similar, unbelievable success rate at a time when it was, still kind of taking the league by storm. We're going for it on fourth down way more than usual. And, oh, by the way, Lamar Jackson is at the center of all these things. And then they run into the Titans in the playoffs and go 0 for 2 on fourth downs in that particular game, right? And that was a huge part of why they lost it. So the variability of fumbles, tipped passes, interceptions, and then these fourth downs going to be absolutely massive here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we said last week, right? That might be the biggest game all year in terms of like wild fourth down variance, because both coaches were going to be aggressive and go for it and, that kind of thing. I don't think the same's probably not true this week. Like Philadelphia goes for them a lot, but they're the very short ones, the push play, where it's basically just free. It's free extension.
They're 90% success.
Yeah, it's like at that point you might as well assume that they picked it up on third down, right? It's not quite the same thing, but you are going to. It is going to be another. It's a variable every time a team like Washington rocks up, because they are going to put those chips on the table in these situations.
Before we make our picks, let's talk. I want to, for both games, talk a little bit narrative and what it means for the QBs, what it means for the organizations. Eagles. I think I may have misspoken the other time that the last time they were in the NFC Championship, I meant to say 2022. Obviously, they went to the Super Bowl that year and lost to the Chiefs. I may have accidentally said 2017. My brain was saying 22. Last time they played in the 3 o'clock window at home, playing in the NFC Championship, that was when Brock Purdy got hurt and we had like Christian McCaffrey playing quarterback for the Niners, kind of a cakewalk into the Super Bowl. But yeah, the Eagles have a chance to get to the Super Bowl for the second time in 3 years. Jalen Hurts was kind of described as this player that always seems to find a way to win. He did it at Alabama. He did it at Oklahoma. It's not always pretty. but he's cool under pressure, right? He's cool in these clutch situations. Now you're starting to hear this about Jaden Daniels quite a bit, and I think both are true. Both guys have found a way, I think, to always be a part of winning teams, elevating wherever they've been, and I think it's a fascinating matchup, I think, for both of these guys.
It's an interesting championship weekend because I think 3 of the 4 teams have an incredibly compelling storyline just as a neutral, right? I don't care which one of these 4 teams wins. So the Lions losing removed my only rooting interest from this, which is I had a ticket for a Detroit Kansas City Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
So for a while I still had a rooting interest. Now who cares? Any of the 4 is a worthy winner in my opinion. I do, however, think that 3 of the 4, though, have a very compelling storyline that would make it an incredible overall story should they win. Philadelphia is the one where like Washington would be a rookie quarterback winning a Super Bowl. That's insane, particularly given the turnaround that they've had from where they were a year ago. Kansas City's three-peat speaks for itself. It's history. It's never been done in the Super Bowl era, which is a little bit of an arbitrary, since the merger.
It's not that arbitrary. It's when there wasn't, 8 teams.
No, there were like a lot of teams before. Literally, it's the three-peat stopped basically at the point. Like Green Bay won 3 straight, including I think this first Super Bowl. Like they were back-to-back NFL champions when they took on the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs and stomped them. And it's like, wow, that doesn't count. That's not a three-peat because 2 of them were before this. Whatever. My point being, three-peat, history, amazing. And what's the other? Buffalo, 0-4 in the Super Bowl. If they got one, it would be an incredible, downtrodden franchise finally gets their Super Bowl. Philadelphia, what's their storyline? I mean, it's Saquon's revenge. It's just not as good a story. It's cool, and Philadelphia getting back to the Super Bowl, 3 Super Bowls in a few years. It's fine, but it's definitely a worse story than the other 3.
I mean, I think the story that's fascinating is in a QB-driven league where Brady and Mahomes have won all the Super Bowls, or at least gone to all the Super Bowls the last decade plus. Now the Eagles have a chance to win their second Super Bowl in 7 years with 2 different quarterbacks. The first time they did it was with a backup. I mean, and it's the team building effort of what Howie Roseman has done. And we sit here every April complimenting, wow, good job in free agency, nice job in the draft, every single year. And they went down, right? They came down off their Super Bowl win and built this roster back up again.
But their story is just pretty good.
It's not like a compelling.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We're not writing a 30 for 30 on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything.
That's my point. Is their story is basically just pretty good franchise gets back again and wins one. It's like, all right, cool. Whereas the other 3, that's a perfect way of putting it. The other 3 are legitimate 30 for 30.
They're 30 for 30
right?
stories.
Any of the 3 can make a legitimate 30 for 30 story if they end up winning the Super Bowl. If the Eagles win a Super Bowl, there is no 30 for 30 there.
Yeah, and Jaden Daniels being a rookie, coming into the team with the number 2 overall pick last year. Him, Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, all coming in, turning the organization around in 1 year. It's impressive nonetheless, no matter what happens this weekend. So looking forward to it. I think it should be a great game.
I will, however,
surprised that the Commanders have done this to this point, but I've been very impressed.
What would get them a 30 for 30, though, the Eagles, is if Jalen Hurts goes down or doesn't, or somehow the injury is worse than we thought, or he re-aggravates it or whatever, and Tanner McKee becomes Nick Foles and has 2 of the most spectacular playoff games of all time.
Tanner McKee could be the best.
Wins the NFC Championship game, wins the Super Bowl, and now the Eagles have created absolute illogical witchcraft 2 times in a row to win a Super Bowl. That would be a 30
Tanner
for 30.
McKee as Nick Foles.
Foles.
Don't miss out on. We thought last year's Eagles collapse was the worst that we had seen in recent modern NFL history.
Yeah,
which it was.
Right,
and they bounced back from that,
but not unexpectedly.
I know, but a little bit. I mean, it was like to me, it was one of the biggest stories of the year.
It was a big story, but it's
top
not like
32. I think every team's got.
Nobody was writing off the Eagles before this year.
The defense fell apart. Dom got banned from the sideline. A lot of bad stuff happened last year.
There was, and that's why they collapsed. But it's like, nobody was coming into this year going, well, the Eagles have no shot based off Dom getting banned and everything that went wrong last year. They're done. Wrap it up. Move on. It's like, no, they got 2 new coordinators, and you're like, that could go a long way towards patching this team back up, and it did.
All right. You want to make some picks?
Sure.
Eagles by 6.5 here. By the way, the previous games they beat Washington. What was it week 11 was 26-18, as you mentioned. That was the Eagles kind of pulling away in the second half. In Philly, the game in Washington, Commanders won, and that was a walk-off, right? That was Jaden Daniels, who made he probably had one of his more inconsistent games throughout the game, but then just offset it by some incredible big-time throws, including the game winner. They won 36-33 just before Christmas. So
I will go with Washington to keep it closer than that and potentially even spring an upset.
Same. I'm going to say Washington keeps it close. I think the Eagles get back to the Super Bowl, though. So I'll say Eagles by 3 or so.
I think Philly probably wins, but I do think if Jalen Hurts is not, pretty close to 100%, I honestly think this becomes a coin flip. If he's not able to be the rushing threat that he normally is, I think this game immediately becomes up in the air.
All right, so I'll take Washington to cover. By the way, weather-wise, thank you, Anthony, for the weather here. Cloudy with a high of 41 degrees, low of 24, winds of 10 to 15 miles an hour, 0% chance of precipitation. 0%. Kurt Warner, it's going to be okay, everybody. It's going to be okay. The Dome people, the weather's not going to be a big factor this week after multiple snow games last week.
Bummer.
All right, AFC Championship, 6:30. Buffalo Bills at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs favored by 1.5 here. The rematch, once again, in the playoffs. Bills own the regular season. Chiefs own the playoffs. The over-under's 47.5.
That dynamic's kind of wild. I didn't realize that Buffalo had been so successful against Kansas City in the regular season. Like, obviously, we know they've never beaten them in the playoffs in this run of, Allen versus Mahomes. I didn't realize they were 4-1 against them in the regular season during that time, though.
I don't know if anyone's done it, but I'm sure there's a wonderful montage of which we would be a part, where there's people saying, I think the Bills have figured out the Chiefs. I think the Bills have figured out the Chiefs. I think the Bills have figured out the Chiefs because they won in the regular season, right? And then you get to the playoffs, it's like, well, they already beat them in the regular season. They already figured them out, right? So every single year we get convinced they figured them out.
This is the year.
They figured them out. I know what I said last year about the Bills. A lot of the same stuff I said this year. Winning without Josh Allen, right? More of a team effort, better defense, better run game, better yak plays. I think this year it's been more true than ever for the Bills. But I was saying the same thing last year. My biggest concern in this game, though, is the injuries for Buffalo in the secondary and whether guys are playing through injury or banged up. This is what happened last year. Kansas City's in the playoffs again as the healthiest team.
Yeah.
And this is a huge factor. Taron Johnson, Matt Milano, Christian Benford's in concussion protocol. Don't know what they're going to get out of him. Like, there's 4 defensive players. Taylor Rapp. For Buffalo, they went in last year. Remember, they were pulling A.J. Klein off the couch to play linebacker. And the Chiefs' offense, this was the best game the Chiefs played last year offensively, was the divisional round against Buffalo. This, snap for snap, drive for drive was the best game that the Chiefs played. And to me, it was because Buffalo was completely banged up. This is why I think, not taking anything away from the Chiefs, I'm not going to blame the refs or any of that. There is luck involved as well. And the Chiefs ran into a depleted Buffalo team last year in the playoffs. And I fear that maybe we're going to miss out on a great game because of some of these injuries.
It's also, this is where I think you feel the power of the number 1 seed in the bye, is they've had a week where they didn't risk anybody with injury, right? So not only is it recovery for people that were on their way back, but it's also a game, a violent football game that is, players talk about it as a weekly car crash. It's one fewer car crash they experience than everybody else, right? There's a huge power to that. So you're right. Look,
there was also
all of a sudden,
really quick. Sorry, they lost Rashee Rice. That was real.
Yeah.
But there was also a timing aspect. Like earlier in the year, they lost Rashee Rice. They lost Isaiah Pacheco.
Right.
Charles Omenihu. They had a lot of injuries early. Jalen Warren. But they were early. They just the timing just matched up for the Chiefs. They survived early injuries so they could get healthy for right now.
They are all of a sudden deploying a very healthy roster with a lot of important players coming back. You've got Pacheco coming back healthy now, splitting time with Kareem Hunt and giving them, a dual threat in the backfield. You've got Hollywood Brown coming back and healthy and becoming a completely different threat within that offense. You've got Charles Omenihu coming back in the defensive line, who's been such an important player for them when he's healthy, in particular in the postseason. He got hurt in the Super Bowl, right? Was it the Super Bowl, the AFC Championship game? Again, but now you've got, like, Chris Jones is an absolute beast. George Karlaftis has just improved all the way throughout his career and is a significant threat for them. Omenihu is back and being a real weapon on the interior. Tershawn Wharton is an important sort of situational pass rusher for them as well. like suddenly that defensive line is way more formidable than it was when it was basically just Karlaftis and Chris Jones. There's more weaponry there, and Buffalo has to try and deal with that. So, yeah, I think the Chiefs, by timing or accident, have they've gotten healthy at the right time. Obviously, you're missing a couple of players, but this is a very different team, I think, than it was certainly the last time the two teams played.
So if Benford was a limited participant in concussion protocol, I'm assuming that means he's back. Should be back by then, potentially. Matt Milano, I think he's going to be okay. He missed the last 4 snaps of the divisional round game. I think he'll be okay. Deion Dawkins missed practice because of an illness. I'm assuming he'll be back. I think Taylor Rapp's probably not there, but I mean he's listed as day to day. So we'll see. And then Taron Johnson's playing. He's got a shoulder injury that he got later in the game, where he's got a harness that he's probably going to be playing with, and we'll see what that, how that affects things. But just like the X's and O's matchup and everything, we talk about the turnovers. You said, hey, we may be neglected to say that last time with Buffalo. Yeah. They have the best turnover margin in the NFL, almost 1.8 plus 1.8 per game.
Yeah, this is fascinating because you've got the best turnover team in the NFL in Buffalo versus the Kansas City playoff Chiefs, who stopped making mistakes. This is the key to this game, as stupid as it is. Like, the Bills consistently this year have won the turnover battle. Every single game, like you said, basically plus 2 turnovers a game versus their opponent. That's insane. It was literally the difference between them and the Ravens. The Ravens, in almost every other measure, were better than the Bills last week. The one area where they weren't, turnovers. They had a bunch of them. Buffalo had none of them. Ergo, Buffalo wins that game. Kansas City, the thing that defines this team, the three-peat quest, is once you hit the postseason, Mahomes goes, boom, stops making errors, right? His turnover-worthy play rate drops from middle of the pack to like the best in the NFL the second you hit postseason play. Travis Kelce shows up, becomes more of a factor. All those things happen, but the key thing is they stop turning the ball over. So which one breaks, right? That's the thing. One of those things has got to give. Either Buffalo stops winning the turnover margin, plus 2 per game, or Kansas City is able to, or Kansas City is one of those things has got to, either Buffalo stops what they're doing, or Kansas City stops not making mistakes and they actually create some turnovers.
Or just there's no turnovers for either team, and every possession is crucial. The fourth,
but that becomes that's Kansas City winning that part, right? That immovable object versus the irresistible force. If that's how it plays out, Kansas City wins, because Kansas City they maintained their status quo, which is we're not going to make mistakes in the postseason. Buffalo loses their status quo because they're not plus 2 in the turnover battle.
Yeah, in the first matchup, it was essentially 1-to-1 in the turnover. So Mahomes threw a very early interception, just kind of chucked it up, turned it over. Allen had an interception, but it was on 4th down, so it's kind of like wasn't a massive effect. It was like a miscommunication on 4th down. Then Mahomes had a late interception when they were down 9. So it was essentially 1-to-1, and there was a force late by Mahomes when they were down. So I thought the Chiefs moved the ball pretty effectively in that game, and then I go back to the playoff game, right? I mean, in the playoff game last year, where the Chiefs were kind of unstoppable, and so if the Bills can't force a turnover, can they stop Kansas City? And it's not like the most explosive Kansas City offense or anything like that, but the Bills are 12th this year in EPA per play allowed defensively. They're okay defensively, but they're one of those teams where a little boom or bust, right? A little bit like we've described the Browns, where it's like almost the opposite of the Browns, where the Browns are very good. Last year's Browns, this year's Texans, right? Where play for play, things are difficult. This was last week, Chiefs-Texans. Play for play, the Texans like holding the Chiefs down, holding them down, then they bust a coverage and give up a 49-yarder. The Bills are kind of the opposite, where they're going to give up yards. Could be on the ground, could be through the air, but they're going to get a key turnover. They did this with the Ravens last week as well. Gave up a lot of yards, got run over at points, but they forced 2 Lamar turnovers, then they forced the Mark Andrews one, and you start flipping possessions. I don't think Buffalo can play that game and continue to just give up yards and hope, again, both ways. You're earning these turnovers, you're forcing them, but you're also hoping that the offense creates makes some mistakes. You can't sit there and hope that Mahomes in Kansas City is going to make these mistakes.
Yeah, well, yeah, a big a bend but don't break defense is only a sort of really big positive thing if you're also combining that with turnovers. And that's what Buffalo's done this season. They give up a lot, but they offset a lot with turnovers. If you take away the turnover aspect of that and you're just saying this is just a bend but don't break defense, but we're consistently going to give up yards and potentially points at the end of it, 3 of them rather than 7, you're still putting yourself in a pretty difficult spot. The big difference, though, I think, between last week, I think the narrative was we didn't give enough credence to the turnover aspect of this team, but we're like, they are kind of overmatched by Baltimore's offense, and I don't know how they can consistently stop them, and they couldn't, but they got turnovers, right? The big difference between that team and Kansas City is their ability to run the football. Like, Baltimore was the number 1 team in the NFL this year in rushing success rate, according to PFF. Number 2 is Buffalo. Kansas City, including the playoffs, is all the way down in 26th, right? Now, okay, they had Isaiah Pacheco missing for a chunk of that time. They're probably better than that overall, but let's call this an average at best rushing team from an efficiency standpoint, right? That's very different. Like, that's the kind of team where Buffalo's defense might be able to stop that without doing anything crazy with just their normal defense. And that's very different. So even if you take away the turnovers, you might still be able to stop Kansas City because a lot of teams have this year. They're not able to just run the ball at will. You don't have to deal with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. It's a very different defensive assignment that it was a week ago for Baltimore.
What else with when Kansas City has the ball here, just kind of focusing on that side a little bit more? I think Buffalo was banged up earlier in the year. I think having Matt Milano, again, had missed his last 4 plays. I think he'll be good to go. Wasn't there in the first matchup, right? Did I remember that correctly?
I mean, Milano's deployment last week, I think, was pretty fascinating. Like, they used him to spy Lamar Jackson. Like, Patrick Mahomes is not Lamar Jackson from a rushing threat. He is, however, kind of similar in these high leverage plays, 3rd and 4th down. If you don't rush with integrity, Mahomes just skips up through the pocket and then boom, there's 15 free yards. I'm going to take it, extend the drive. Do they use Milano the same way, right? Which is like as an add-on blitzer. If the running back stays in, you shoot. Be aware of Mahomes. The second he breaks the pocket, that's your assignment. Shut him down. Because those plays are huge. Every playoff game is Mahomes.
Not there in the first matchup, Milano.
Right. Those plays are huge. Yeah. Is every playoff game Mahomes' ability to just scamper through the line, pick up a free first down, do it all over again.
Yeah, and I think that's every defensive line's difficulty is, especially when you might have a weakness at tackle. Like, Jawan Taylor can give up pressure, and certainly Joe Thuney, who's a good tackle for a guard, but an average NFL tackle when he's out there. It's got to be tempting to win, right? And you got that one quick win where Thuney gave up a sack last week to win versus if you blow one gap, if Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, you lose one gap up front, Patrick Mahomes is taken off, and then figuring out how do you deploy Milano. I think it's going to be interesting because Kansas City just attacked the middle of the field left and right against the Texans. They didn't even care that Derek Stingley was out there. Doesn't even matter. They're going to attack your weaknesses. Travis Kelce in the playoffs always finds a way to get open. Are they going to feed Kelce again in the middle of the field? That's another place where Matt Milano is absolutely crucial.
Buffalo's defensive line needs to have a huge game. Kansas City has that weakness on the offensive line. This is, I think, the worst offensive line in front of Mahomes since the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay that made them completely reassess everything they wanted to do on the offensive line, right? They went into that Super Bowl with basically an entire backup offensive line, and it got completely destroyed, and they had no shot of winning that game because of it. Since then, they went, that's never happening again. We are going to throw all the resources at this offensive line. We're going to make sure Mahomes always has a good unit in front of him. And then because of injuries and a gamble at left tackle, this year it hasn't been the case. And now you are going into this game with 2 defined weaknesses, right? The left side of that line is weak. Joe Thuney is a perfect description. He's a good left tackle for a guard, which makes him a pretty bad left tackle, right? In overall terms, he's a substandard left tackle by league overall standards. He's great for a guard trying to do it as a backup option, but he's a substandard guy to be left on his own one-on-one with a good pass rusher. We saw that last week against Houston. If you leave him on an island, you have trouble. Also, it makes left guard worse because now Caliendo is significantly worse than Joe Thuney, who's an all-pro caliber left guard. So the left side of that line is frail. And they know that, so they have to dedicate extra resources to it. You watch the snaps that Joe Thuney is playing. He's being given a ton of help. Chips, backs, tight ends, all these things. So that's how the Chiefs are going into this game, knowing that there are two weak spots on the left side of the line, shifting all the help in that direction. That dynamic is it's a given. It's a stipulation going into this game. So if Buffalo's defensive line can either win their one-on-one matchups on the other side, right? Go beat up Jawan Taylor, go win against Trey Smith, the guys that are going to be isolated because all the help's going left, or win against the help anyway. Either way, if that defensive line can actually take advantage of what is a defined weakness for the first time in a long time, that's an advantage.
And that's Gregory Rousseau.
Yep.
Which will be interesting if they do try to put him on Thuney's side and attack that. Thuney lacking a little bit of length, Rousseau, really long. If that's a matchup that they try to exploit, Von Miller for 15, 20, 25 rushes on the other side. Is this the game where it feels like, hey, we got our money's worth with Von Miller, even at this point in his career? I think those things are
the funny thing.
huge.
They don't need Von Miller to do anything other than have 2 games where he gets 8 pressures, and this would be one of them.
Historically he's done that in the playoffs. It was years ago, but Rams in 21 and Broncos in 2015, 2 Super Bowl runs where Von Miller was a big part of it. So that anything else on that side of the ball? Kansas City's offense against the Buffalo defense.
I guess whether Mahomes is going to continue this gaming the system, getting some free calls thing. A guy DM'd me this thing, a guy on Twitter called NFL Ref Stats, who basically is one of these people that goes hyper in deep with the assignments and all the officials that are getting assigned to the game. He has this giant dissertation about the officials that have been assigned to this game, which I won't go into because nobody cares.
I saw Warren put stuff out.
Yeah, nobody cares. But the summary he had on this is the NFL is clearly looking to push back on the pro-Chiefs narrative with this assignment. When he ran through the numbers, nobody presented a better choice than Clete Blakeman, who's the head official with this game, to do this game. His assignment wasn't by accident. So he thinks that this assignment has basically been designed to not, at the very minimum, let's have it not be a pro Kansas City dynamic given the way. He's one of these people.
It's so prevalent right now. The narrative is so prevalent right now, I wouldn't be surprised.
He's one of these guys that breaks down, how much does this officiating crew call these plays relative to league average, all that kind of stuff. Where are the advantages or where are the things that this crew does more or less than other teams? So his point is essentially this assignment has been designed to, at the very minimum, not obviously pair the type of officiating crew that gives those favorable calls in these situations to what Kansas City has been getting, or certainly got last week. The minimum, it's let's make sure it's down the line.
Should be interesting. And I had a feeling that because the chatter, again, Troy Aikman spoke out about it. It wasn't just Twitter chatter.
Just spoke out about it. I don't think I've ever heard I don't think I've ever heard an announcer live on the broadcast respond the way the rest of us respond, which is to audibly go, "Come on!"
Yeah,
he literally, that was his reaction to the second hit, was to yell out, "Come on!" as if he's a fan watching on the couch, watching a bad call happen in front of him. I don't think I've ever heard an announcer do that.
That's the way it should be. Should be. I could see them trying to say let's take it easy on roughing calls, let's take it easy on late hits, let's just let the boys play, so to speak.
Right. But again, a huge part of that dynamic is Mahomes playing to the rules, quote unquote, right? He is, again, if you go back and replay all of that Trevor Lawrence conversation that happened, and it was absurd because Lawrence was not responsible for getting decked the way people were trying to make out. Mahomes kind of is, though. That hit, the second one in particular, right? 3 frames before they hit him in the head, they're aiming at his midsection, and they're both
and that
leading.
Is in the rules, right? I've heard our friend Dean break it down. It is in the rules. If you start your tackle while a guy's upright and then he goes down, that's not a penalty.
And they're both leading,
get crushed.
And they're both leading with the shoulder, with their eyes up, 3 frames before it happens, right? My math might be janky on this, but they shoot at 24, 30 frames a second or something. So 3 frames is a tenth of a second. So in a tenth of a second, Mahomes goes from, this is a perfectly legal hit, they're leading with the shoulder, eyes up, textbook, right? To A split second later, Mahomes has dropped so far backwards that his head almost ends up clearing them completely. They hit each other more than they hit him, but there is helmet-to-helmet contact, right? So that difference, the three frames, is Mahomes deciding way later than he should, now I'm going to slide and try and get out of this. Fair play to him, right? It's in the rules.
But it's not a by-the-book penalty. It was a bad call, too.
But the point is, he's trying to play the system. This is what we've set up now as the dynamic, where if you try and protect yourself late, you're going to get the flag. My point is, he's doing effectively what he should do, but what he is doing is drawing these penalties in a way most other quarterbacks have not been successful at achieving. Certainly, Trevor Lawrence wasn't doing when he got decked by Al-Shahir. But these are high leverage plays. If Mahomes is able to do that and extend a drive because of it, it has been the difference in several playoff games. Whether or not it was a good or bad call, the point is he's achieving this, right? He's manufacturing these flags because of the way he's playing the game, and that's an important thing to mention, regardless of whose fault it is, right? I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. I'm not saying officials are idiots. I'm not saying Mahomes is an asshole for doing this. I'm simply saying this is a relevant part of this football game, and we can't just act like it doesn't exist.
All right, let's go to the other side of the ball. Buffalo has the ball going up against this Kansas City defense. Remember, the last game was 30-21, but we would talk about how the high leverage plays completely potentially changed the game. Mm-hmm. Remember how it all went down. Buffalo was up 2. Was it 2 or 3? They're up 3. Make sure we got it right here. They're up 3 late in the game. They have a 3rd and 2. They run the ball right up the gut, get stopped. It's 4th and 2, and they have that decision. Do we kick a field goal, go up 6, give the ball back to Mahomes, or do we go for it on 4th and 2? They go for it on 4th and 2, and Josh Allen makes one of his MVP caliber plays. Part of the reason why there was an MVP narrative for Josh Allen was this play right here. It's game on the line against the best team in the league, the defending champs. You took it to the house for a touchdown to go up 2 scores and essentially seal the deal here. So that's what happened last time around in this game. So it was a 9-point game, but it was, it came down to one play. And so I think on one hand, if Buffalo's presented the same situation as they were last week, which was, hey, do we kick a field goal to go up 8 and give the ball back to Mahomes like they did with Lamar last week, or do we have a chance to go up 2 scores and finish this thing? I think Buffalo historically is going to lean aggressive now because of the history. And the other part of this offense was the run game. Kansas City's run defense can just get into these runs where they are so good and stout up front. And Buffalo did not move the ball on the ground. James Cook, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, none of those guys had a lot of success except, tight red zone. They had a couple touchdowns. Is this the game where it's a little bit more on Josh Allen, both as a runner and as a passer? They didn't lean on him a ton last week, and they still moved the ball pretty effectively, but they hit some lulls. Is this the game where it's a little bit more on Josh Allen to win it?
Yeah, I think that a lot like last week, I feel like Josh Allen is going to need to be the Superman version of Josh Allen for them to have that level of success. Now, it is a bit different though. Like I mentioned before, Baltimore was the number 1 team in the NFL at rushing success rate. Buffalo's number 2. This is a thing that's different from this Bills team versus a couple, the last few, is this run game is for real. And okay, Josh Allen's a part of it, definitely, like Lamar Jackson is for Baltimore, like Jalen Hurts is for Philly, like Jaden Daniels is for Washington. Allen is a big part of that as well, but they have a significantly higher rushing efficiency and success just with James Cook than they've had in previous seasons. And that, I think, is a big part of why they've been better, even though they haven't necessarily needed to lean on Josh Allen as much. This run game, we all sort of focused on how do they replace Stephon Diggs? Will this mismatch of slot weapons actually form a coherent offense? And we didn't sort of focus on, well, what if the replacement for that is actually in a different area? What if the replacement is in the run game becoming more efficient? And actually they don't need the one guy that can win consistently on the outside one-on-one, and they can get by with Keon Coleman a couple of times a game, Amari Cooper a couple of times a game, Mac Hollins every now and again. That will do as long as the run game is able to work as well as it works. That's a potential thing as well. If that run game can remain as successful as it is, then Josh Allen doesn't need to do everything every series.
Yeah, the last time they played too, I pulled out the stat that the Chiefs were one of the least effective teams covering slot receivers. That's since kind of regressed back to the mean a little bit. But if you're attacking Kansas City, I do believe it's a lot easier attacking with the Khalil Shakirs and Curtis Samuels of the world than it is, hey, Amari Cooper, go beat Trent McDuffie on the outside, one-on-one. Cooper, remember, had just joined the Bills a couple weeks prior. He had 2 big catches in this game where Josh Allen had to put the ball right on him, big-time throws, 2 catches for 55 yards. I still think you probably need to steal a couple of those big plays, but I think Buffalo can play their game. I'm interested with how much they stick with the run game, though, because Kansas City, like I said, they have that ability to just really make you one-dimensional, force you into the 3rd and longs, and then it's, hey, Allen versus Spags, and beat the blitz, right? And a few times Spags is going to come after you. And there's going to be plays. There's going to be plays in this game, Sam, where Dano the next day is like, where do you throw the ball? It's impossible, right? There's nobody open, right? Spags creates those plays. You have 6 dudes running after you. You have one-on-ones across the board, and every Chiefs defender is in the hip pocket of your receiver. And how will Josh Allen make plays on 2 or 3 of those in this game? 3rd and 7, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11. Will he make plays? It could be one where he jukes a blitzer and scrambles to the right and he's falling out of bounds and he throws it back and finds a guy. Or he just outruns everybody or whatever it is. To me, it's those high leverage plays, right? So there's the 4th downs, but there's also Spags versus Allen. It's 3rd and forever. Can Allen steal a couple of those plays for the Bills in this one?
When blitzed this season, Josh Allen is completing 8 yards per attempt, 77.1% of his passes for 8 yards per attempt, 17 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, and a passer rating of 114.
Yeah, and there was a point where his 9 out of his first 10 passing touchdowns were all against 0 blitz.
Yeah.
Right? They were all tight red zone. Everybody's coming after you, and they had answers and answers and answers. That is a different part of this Bills team where it's not just outside receiver reliant. It's the middle of the field, right? It is the slot receivers, Dalton Kincaid, who will be playing in this game as well. The guys that can attack the middle of the field. So, look, I think Buffalo is more equipped to attack this Kansas City defense maybe than ever before because of the way they've built this thing.
It hasn't always been the case, but I think Josh Allen this year has been absolutely devastating against the blitz. So what Spags did last week, for example, right, when it reached a point and it was like a go, and he just teed off on C.J. Stroud. And the Texans, who haven't really had an answer for that stuff all the way through the season, remained having no answers and got absolutely lit up. I don't think that'll happen against Josh Allen. Number one, I don't know if Spags will do that. If he'll just go, all right, now unleash it, go. I don't know if he's that confident that it will work against Buffalo that he was against Houston. But if they do, like if he does dial that up, I would kind of bank on Allen making a couple of big plays against that.
It's going to be electric. Let's talk legacy stuff, Sam.
Okay.
We got to talk a little bit about what it all means. Of course, Mahomes and the Chiefs going for the three-peat, first time in the Super Bowl era, 4th Super Bowl in 6 years would be. And the Bills, of course, trying to break the drought.
The duck.
Ends the doubt and the drought. Is this the year for Buffalo and Josh Allen, or is it another year where Buffalo and the Bills, Buffalo and Allen, beat the Chiefs in the regular season, but just can't do it in crunch time? I want to remind you, too, okay, really quick. Somebody asked me, like, who's got more pressure on him? It's like, well, of course, it's Allen, right? Because the human aspect of this, they have these one-off plays, 13 seconds. Last year, remember Allen had an open receiver in the end zone for the go-ahead touchdown. Open receiver. And it just happened that left tackle's bull rushed into him, hits his leg, forces an inerrant throw. I mean, those are the margins that the Chiefs keep winning by, right? 13 seconds here, a bull rush there, one-off plays here and there, Stephon Diggs drop, right? All of these plays have to be playing in the Bills' minds throughout this game. Clearly the pressure's on them, and they have to say, okay, this time we just have to make that one extra play to pull this thing off.
Yeah, look, Josh Allen is unfortunately dealing with being, like, he is the Ben Roethlisberger Steelers. He's the other, like the Peyton Manning Colts, the team that isn't the dynasty trying to get over the line and win one, whilst the other team, the dynasty team, is just there every year, right? In all things being equal, we will win the Super Bowl. Every now and again, we'll lose one. But generally speaking, unless somebody does something special, we're going to win, right? That's Mahomes and the Chiefs. They are going to win the Super Bowl every year where an elite team doesn't stop them. Buffalo haven't been able to do it the last few years. They've run into the Chiefs in the postseason. They've lost, and they've been really close, but they've lost every time. So, yeah, now the pressure is mounting because it's been a while. And, Peyton Manning was saying this when he was talking to Kevin Clark, I think, on his podcast. He's like, look, I was that guy for the first 8 years. And it's actually, you kind of forget how long it was before Peyton Manning won the ring. 8 years into his career it took him before he got that. Allen's there, and he's 3 or 4 years banging his head against this wall and hasn't been able to do it. It is, however, a coin flip, essentially. I mean, even Vegas, right? This is a 1.5-point line on the road. And I think now the way that it used to be 3 points, essentially, was the home field advantage thing. I think the way it's come down now, it's basically 1.5. So Vegas is almost saying this is exactly a coin flip.
And Vegas didn't want to make the mistake they made last year where they made Kansas City underdogs in the Super Bowl, the AFC Championship, and the divisional. They made them, I think, 3 straight underdogs, right, against Buffalo, Baltimore, and San Francisco.
But they're basically saying this is exactly a coin flip. So I kind of see it that way, right? It's Buffalo have already shown they can beat them. Okay, Kansas City's a little healthier now than they were before, but so is Buffalo. They've gotten back, Matt Milano, et cetera, important players. So can they win? Absolutely. Will they? I would, if it's break the tie, if it's a tiebreaker, which it basically is, if we're saying it's a coin flip, my default position is Kansas City wins at home because they always win at home. So until Buffalo shows that they can do it, I will come down on the side of Kansas City just as the tiebreaker. But Buffalo can absolutely win this game, and I don't know if it's damaging for Josh Allen's legacy. If he doesn't win, it just becomes the next one of the Peyton Manning first 8 years, right? But that becomes frustrating for somebody that can't get over that line.
Well, then for Buffalo, it's like, we thought this was our best all-around team. How do we go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to beat this team?
Right.
What are your thoughts on our friend Ariel Helwani, friend of the show?
Yeah.
He said, Josh needed this. He said, look, this is what we need. We want to go through Kansas City. This is Josh's Bulls-Pistons moment, right? The Pistons always beat the Bulls throughout the 80s. And then that one time, Jordan and the Bulls beat the Pistons. They beat the bad boys, turned it around, and they became the next dynasty or a dynasty in your world. Is this the turning point? Is this the flip? Is this the game that flips it all on its head for Josh Allen and the Bills and Ariel?
I mean, it could be. By the way, Ariel is like this close from having one of the greatest sporting fandom years that anybody's ever had, right? Bills fan, as we know from having him on the show a few times. So this 0-4 Bills team in the Super Bowl era, et cetera. Like he told us before, he just wants one, ever, right? I just want one. I want to feel what that is like. He's 2 games away from the Bills side of things. He's a Nottingham Forest fan in Premier League soccer, right?
Huge.
Forest got promoted a couple of years ago from the championship. That's a team that's supposed to be essentially fighting around just to stay in the league. They are currently in 3rd position, tied with the 2nd position team on points. Like they're a few games away from being in the Champions League after getting promoted a couple of years ago. Like this is absurd. It's one of the most ridiculous runs anybody's been on. They're like a legitimate threat to theoretically still mount a title challenge. Like he's this close from his team in the NFL winning a Super Bowl for the first time ever, and his Premier League team making the Champions League when everyone was expecting them to be scrapping just to stay in the league. That's pretty insane.
Is he a Dodgers fan too? Hopefully he's a Dodgers fan.
I don't know.
Things are going well for the Dodgers.
Is he a Knicks fan as well in basketball?
Well, that'll never go well.
No, as we know from Harrison.
All right, let's make some picks here. Chiefs by 1.5 here. Sunday night, 6:30.
It's like I said, coin flip. I'm gonna side with the Chiefs until that's my default position until somebody shows me otherwise. So Kansas City.
I'm gonna say Buffalo does it this year. That they pull it off.
I would bank on Buffalo to cover a spread, but the spread is 1.5 points.
Right.
So I'm going to assume that most of the time that's Kansas City winning.
Let's say Buffalo. Philly will be my Super Bowl pick. Close to my Bengals-Eagles preseason pick.
Yeah, one of them's still alive at least.
Very close to it. All right, we got PrizePicks, and then we got Ari coming on here. Let's go PrizePicks. We going to do PrizePicks? We officially doing that? We're right on time.
I believe we have to. So
look at that. We are on time today. We're on time. It's unbelievable. Let's talk PrizePicks. It's just championship weekend.
First time ever. On time.
It is. It really is. Let's start with your lineup, man. What you
All
got?
right. It's interesting. You get the games shrink down, so you get a little more options with the PrizePicks thing in the playoffs. I'm a big fan of that. I'm going to stick with this formidable and efficient Buffalo running game and say that James Cook will have more than 56.5 rushing yards. That's not a high total, you know? Saquon's over here with his 100 or whatever. Like Derrick Henry's always at 100.
You know, he had 20 in the first matchup.
Whatever. James Cook and this powerful running game, efficient running game, he's going to have more than 56.5. In fact, he's going to take that first outcome as an insult and show you that he should be getting more than that. Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is such an important player for that Washington team. The dude has been a real find for them, a resurgence, and he's going to have more than half a rushing and receiving touchdown. He's going to get in the end zone. It's Zach Ertz. Of course he's going to make a big play in the playoffs in the NFC Championship game. Then here's where we get sick. Jake Elliott, the kicker who's forgotten how to kick, at least consistently. Jake Elliott will have more than 1.5 field goals made. I believe Jake Elliott will have at least 2 field goals made. So that's going to be a sweat. When he shanks an extra point wide or shanks a 25-yarder to the left.
When they go for it on 4th down every time and you're over there begging for a kick.
That bit I won't care about as much. It's more when he misses one from 36 that's going to really upset me. But anyway, Jake Elliott.
At least you're ready for it.
We're budgeting in the miss, right? Like they're going to have a shot of 3 or 4, and he might miss 2 of them. But I just need 2. And then Chris Jones, defensive player. Chris Jones going to have more than 0.25 sacks. Only a quarter of a sack. I don't even get half a sack for this to work. He's going to dial it up.
We're going to get. You're even acknowledging half sacks.
We're going to get to a key 3rd down, and Chris Jones is going to move himself around, find the favorable matchup, and boom, at least half a sack.
Chris Jones. Now that Spencer Brown didn't play the first matchup, he will be in this matchup here. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if Chris Jones can beat Spencer Brown.
Doesn't need to beat Spencer Brown. He's going to beat somebody at some point in the game.
Josh Allen with his sack avoidance too. All right, I like it. It's aggressive.
Get it.
Good lineup from you. All right, so that's your line. Are we reviewing Sam's or going right to mine here?
Let's see.
Let's go right to it.
Go right to yours.
I'm kind of like going with some of last week's ideas.
Yeah.
I liked Josh Allen's passing projection last week, which he did not get. But this week he is, right? This week they are going to throw the ball more. So I like more than 229.5 passing yards. It is wild, right? In the MVP season, part of what Allen has done is spread the ball around and taking some off his plate as far as throwing the ball, but I think he's got to get back to that in this game against Kansas City. He's going to make some big plays. So 229.5, I like more than that number for Josh Allen. I'm also going Zach Ertz. Right, you had Ertz for a touchdown. I got Zach Ertz going more than 30.5 receiving yards. This is the way the Eagles play with their corners on the outside, and they, in previous matchups, taking away the outside receivers. I think Jaden Daniels has to attack the middle of the field. Zach Ertz will be the key there, attacking my guy Oren Burks as well. And then I got Saquon Barkley more than 12.5 receiving yards.
Oh, you're going to that well.
Going to what you did last week, right? Just one long catch from Saquon, one little wheel route on Bobby Wagner, whatever it might be. Frankie Louvu in coverage. So Saquon more than 12.5 receiving yards. Let's say Jalen Hurts is going to have to throw the ball a little bit more in this game if he's less mobile, so it will lean into that right there. So there's my picks. Josh Allen more than 229.5 passing yards, Zach Ertz more than 30.5 receiving yards, and Saquon more than 12.5 receiving yards as well.
Nice. I like it.
Yours.
There's mine. James Cook.
You have 4.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta swing for the fences. We also don't we get a free square this week with Jaden Daniels?
There's a Jaden Daniels free square.
Right. Those bonus ones
more than half
a
passing yard.
Right.
It's added to the mix for us.
So there we go. James Cook, more than 56.5 rushing yards. Zach Ertz, more than half a rushing and receiving touchdown. So he just gets in the end zone. We're good. Jake Elliott, more than 1.5 field goals made. And then Chris Jones to get himself a sack of any description, more than a quarter of a sack, and we strike gold.
All right, there you go. PrizePicks, you guys can join in as well. Remember, promo code Check the Mic. You get $50 free when you play your first $5.
You remember when we broke news yesterday? We were first. People, if you check the timestamps, you'll realize that we were first in breaking the Aaron Glenn to New York news. Do you want to do it again? Because I'm
going to send a text out, see if I can confirm
the rumors are hotting up that Brian Schottenheimer is going to be named as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. So I think if you just stare right in that camera now and break the news, you can be Steve Schefter again.
Let me text him first.
Who are you texting?
Shouty.
You're texting Shouty. Well, now you can't. He's not going to.
You think he's not busy? Think he'll respond to me?
I don't think he's going to tell you if it's certainly not on the record if you just text him and say, "Can I I think you just break it. Again, like we did it yesterday and we were right.
We're 1 for 1. We're
Hit
1
it
for
again,
1.
Right?
We're 1 for 1.
Stare straight down the camera and break it.
Breaking news. The Dallas Cowboys have their man. Brian Schottenheimer will be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Shouty, the offensive coordinator, being promoted to head coach in Dallas. You heard it here first. Check the mic.
You dithered too long. In the time it took you to bang on about texting him, Mike Florio tweeted it out.
Oh, no. Mike, closing in on a deal. Closing in.
No, this is why you lose. This is why.
Let me confirm.
This is why, like Schefter and Ramsheet don't wait for. They just fire. Got to get first.
Shouty's the head coach of the Cowboys.
It's too late. You've blown it. You got yesterday's news. We were first.
Just tweet that out.
Now
really,
we're second.
From the 33rd team. Shouty's the new head coach.
There's no prize for being second. We lose.
See if he texts me by the end of the show. There's no way.
No.
We got Ari Meirov here to break down all the news. Ari, can you confirm? Ari, how's it going, man?
I am doing good. Honestly, I'll give you guys
unmute.
credit. I mean, if you guys know what's going on in Dallas, which I think only Jerry Jones knows. So,
oh no,
it's
there we go. It's on us.
Now it's working, right?
Am I on?
There we go.
Gotcha. Hey Ari, how's it going? Let's try this again.
I'm doing good. It's great to be on with the insiders here. I mean, you guys clearly know everything going on around the league, so great to be on.
Well, we just decided yesterday that look, if we just start breaking everything, right? Then we only have to focus on the things we got right. We can just start breaking news before everybody else. We don't like sources. Sources are overrated. Just fire, and if you're right, you nailed it. You were first.
The real insiders, everybody's all cryptic, right? Oh, this thing might go down, and then we're closing in, and we just shoot from the hip. We're gonna say it's gonna happen.
Whenever you're wrong, just say it's a material change and everything. You know, I was right when I reported it.
We're just cutting out the middle now. We don't need the source. We can just say it, and then if we're right, we roll on.
Well, let's start. Let's start with the Shouty news. Is this? Do you think this is all going down for Dallas? Are these reports that it's close? Are we correct?
I feel like we all fell for the Dion stuff, and that's what Jerry wanted to do when it dropped on Monday night during the Vikings-Rams game, where it's like, you know what, let's put this out there, get the attention to Dallas again, get the spotlight. And as soon as it happened, of course, it's gone dead ever since. And now their plan is to go with continuity and the cheapest option out there, which sounds like Jerry Jones, and that's apparently where this thing is heading towards too. It's a bit surprising to me because Shouty is a great coach. He's been around the NFL for a long time, many different spots. He is really, really close to Dak Prescott, but it's also worth noting he wasn't really calling plays in Dallas. So I'm unsure exactly what they like over here, but if you go back to when they moved on from Mike McCarthy, one of the big things about moving on from him was because they couldn't align on the years. So if Shouty is willing to take a short-term deal, which is what Jerry Jones wanted to do, maybe that's the reason Jerry wants to do this. But if I'm a Cowboys fan today and this does get past the finish line, it's a bit underwhelming considering you moved on from Mike, who still had the team playing hard, who had 3 12-win seasons, and you simply moved on because you guys were not seeing eye to eye when it comes to years. So it's a bit of an underwhelming choice, but keep in mind Kellen Moore is still out there, and I think Jerry Jones is very enamored with him as well. So I wouldn't call this done yet, but it does appear to be, from all the local reports in Dallas who are very close to Jerry, that Shouty is in the front runner right now for that job.
Jerry Jones takes all kinds of crap for, his job as the GM, his job as the owner of the team, and all these kinds of things. And it doesn't help when he starts saying things like, oh, we're all in, and then you get last season. But it seems to me that his biggest flaw actually might just be being cheap. Why is a guy whose net worth is like $17 billion, who's at the helm of the most valuable sports franchise in the world, cheap when it comes to the stuff where there is no salary cap, there is no limit on what he can spend to just throw money at the coaching staff, to throw money at they, on the one hand, you've got the facilities, they're amazing, you've got the star, you've got all this stuff where there is money spent. But then one area where there's no real sense in cheaping out, that's where he goes cheap, and you end up with Brian Schottenheimer as your head coach.
This is probably the one big discussion in the NFL among executives about why aren't the Cowboys more aggressive? When you speak about Jerry and you said it, America's team and all of that, why don't they act like the Eagles or the Browns or the Saints and try to be more aggressive, especially when you have a roster that has so many top players who could take you to playoffs, and we've seen them make the playoffs, but they cannot get over the hump. Like last year, they essentially sat out all of free agency, and they purposely waited on doing the Dak extension, waited on doing the CD extension, let a bunch of people leave the building in free agency. They did not extend Mike McCarthy and his coaching staff, which for any coach in the NFL, it's always uncomfortable whenever you're in the final year of your contract. And they were all uncomfortable throughout the year. Even when Mike McCarthy went out and had to hire a defensive coordinator last year to replace Dan Quinn, Jerry Jones told him you can only get somebody who's going to do a 1 year deal. And that's why he ended up taking his time, and it took a long time. And he finally was able to convince Mike Zimmer to come out of retirement to do a 1 year deal. So it's a very, very cheap way of doing things, and nobody truly understands why. Some people have told me, like, if you come to Dallas, we're not going to overpay you. The fact you're coming here and you're joining this place, this is a place where you could build your own brand. Look at what I've done for, Deion Sanders and Michael Irvin and Troy Aikman and Tony Romo and Jimmy Johnson, where they're all here, and eventually once their careers are over, they become something big after the fact. So coming to Dallas and being with us and maybe taking a little bit less is going to help you in the future. And that's the way Jerry always sees stuff. But it's a very true point, Sam. I really don't know why they act like this, but I don't see it changing at all over here with Jerry at the helm and him essentially running the show over there. This entire coaching search, for what it's worth, from what I've heard, Stephen Jones, McClay, and all those people there, it's not as much them as it is Jerry running the show with all of this.
Ari Meirov, our colleague here at 33rd Team. Ari, tough to you're an objective insider when you cover the NFL, but tough to not notice some tone in the way you've been tweeting about the Jacksonville Jaguars over the last couple of days and some of the moves that they were not making and now have made. What was going on in Jacksonville now that Trent Baalke is officially out as the GM?
Well, over the course of this season, as the year was going on, and there was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on in Jacksonville where the front office was kind of meddling with the coaching staff and wanting changes to happen, I remember catching wind that Doug is for sure out. It could have happened during the bye week after losing in blowout fashion to Detroit, but they didn't have really an interim on staff, so they kept him. But there was buzz building that they might just move on from Doug after the year and hold on to Trent, which was shocking to me, and I had a hard time believing it. And this is the thing about Trent. He has found a way to survive really at multiple places. In San Francisco, when Jim Harbaugh was there, he won a power struggle with him, and he survived while Jim was kicked out. Then they hired Jim Tomsula, who was one and done, but still Baalke survived after that. He hired Chip Kelly, who also was a one and done, and finally they pulled the plug on everybody. But then he ends up in Jacksonville some way, somehow, working under Dave Caldwell, the GM. Dave gets fired. Some way, somehow, Baalke survives. Then Urban Meyer comes in. We know that disaster. He survives as GM there as well. And then Doug Peterson comes in, and he nearly survives this as well, where he's there for an extra 2.5 weeks. So he has found a way to get into the owner's ear at two different locations and survive. And I said this at the time when they moved on from Doug and they kept Trent, they were always going to have a hard time attracting top head coach candidates because people do not want to work with Trent. They had that same problem the last coaching search they did when they ended up hiring Doug. Byron Leftwich was their top target. Byron told Shad Khan, I am not coming here if Trent is the GM. Shad stuck with Trent, and eventually they hired Doug. And once again over here, throughout this coaching search, Ben Johnson was very intrigued by the Jaguars, but he made it known he's not going to stay there if Trent is going to be the GM. There were some talks about moving Trent to an EVP role or moving on from him after the draft. That was not enough for Ben. And then yesterday, the Liam Cohn news happens where he was their number 2 option. He does an extension in Tampa Bay. For what it's worth, he has yet to officially sign that contract, so we'll see maybe they circle back to him. But as of right now, once that news came out that he was going to stay in Tampa Bay, I think that is finally when Shad Khan realized enough is enough. I really do like Trent. He's a great person to me, and I think he could lead this organization. But I realize what the public has been saying about him and the way coaches have been responding over here. We cannot move forward with this organization with him as the GM. So it was known around the NFL when we speak to other executives that Trent Baalke has survived to stay way too long, and basically everyone knew he should not have been retained after the year was over, but Shad Khan. And here we are now, 2.5 weeks later. They finally realized they have to make a change, and now they're kind of behind on everything over here. And we'll see what happens with Liam Cohn. I think he stays in Tampa Bay and signs his contract officially today. I do know behind closed doors, Jacksonville's been trying to get him to come back in for a second interview of Trent no longer there, but I doubt it happens.
So that's a great point. Does getting rid of Balky fix it in the eyes of these coaches that have been turning them down because they don't want to work with Balky? Because on the one hand, yeah, it's great. You finally realize what was self-evident to everybody else coming out of the season, that you should have made that move then. Better late than never, right? On the other hand, you look incompetent doing this, right? Like you sort of acknowledge that this is a rudderless clown show because you didn't see what everybody else saw weeks ago, and now you're way behind the 8 ball. So if you're Liam Cohen looking at this and they're calling you again, like, come on, come back, I have a second conversation, you're like, there's still nobody in that building who knows what they're doing. Like, that's not good. Okay, maybe I can be that guy, and there's a potential power vacuum that I can fill, but like is this any more of an attractive role for slightly different reasons than it was 2 days ago?
The one thing about the Jaguars, and we've seen this through their last couple of searches, is that if you bring in the people there, the GM and head coach, ownership there is going to let the football people do the football stuff. That is known. So it is an attractive job from that sense. But when they were going to try to do an arranged marriage, which is what it was with Doug and Trent, which the first year they were good. Year 2 and year 3, it got really messy behind the scenes over there where Trent was meddling with the coaching staff. It got really, really bad. And that's why he ended up winning a power struggle with Doug for 2.5 weeks over here. But eventually Shad realized. But now it's going to be a clean slate, and they're going to be hiring a new GM and a new head coach. Whoever comes in, this was exactly what we said when they were trying to find the new head coach a few years ago when they ended up hiring Urban Meyer. This is a division which is wide open. It's a state, Florida, where there's no state tax. It's an owner who's not going to meddle. And historically, Shad Khan is somebody who has patience. He's not looking really to move on really quickly. The only time that he did was Urban Meyer, and that was deservedly so because it was such a disaster. But for the most part, whoever he brings in, whether it was at GM with Dave Caldwell, GM with Trent Baalke, and whoever it was, he lets the football people do football things, and he does not meddle there. So that is a good thing about it. But the way this all has unfolded obviously was not great, not the way it's supposed to be done, very messy, very dysfunctional. But they're going to reset over here, and they're going to restart. What the belief was, for what it's worth, was going into this week was we're going to interview Liam Cohn, we're going to interview Patrick Graham and Robert Saleh in the building. That takes care of the Rooney Rule, and then we're supposed to hire Liam Cohn. Liam taking his name out yesterday blew things out of control over there, and that's when they moved on from Trent. So they're resetting right now. We'll see what they do. They might expand the search and bring in Kellen Moore, Joe Brady, and those type of people. But Robert Saleh is still going to interview over here on Thursday, Patrick Graham on Friday, and then they're going to regroup there in Jacksonville.
Ari Meirov of the 33rd Team and NFL Spotlight. Be sure to check out Ari on Twitter, his NFL Spotlight show. Who do you have for a guest this week, Ari?
So we just had, we've been a bit of a safety roll over here. We had Kirby Joseph, the Lions safety, last week. We have Tony Jefferson this week. We'll tease it right now. It's the first time I'm announcing it. But next week, we will be joined by Packers All-Pro safety Xavier McKinney on the show. Nice. NFL Spotlight, we love getting people who deserve more recognition. Kirby and Xavier were both first-team All-Pros this year. Outstanding for their team. Tony Jefferson has been in the NFL for over 10 years. Wants to be a future GM in this league. A very, very unique story. So we go through these guys' backgrounds, their career journeys, and a lot of really, really good stories with all of those guests.
Yeah, so everybody go check out NFL Spotlight from Ari. Well, let's go to the Raiders right now. John Spytek comes over from the Tampa Bay Bucks. He was a co-assistant GM with Mike Greenberg over there. Scouting background, scouting history, former teammate of Tom Brady for a year over at Michigan. What else do you know about Spytek, and how much is Tom Brady involved in the coaching and GM search? How much has he been involved as the minority owner there?
Well, this all but confirms that Tom Brady is very involved. You mentioned they were teammates at Michigan. They didn't really talk or know much of each other back then, but they really got to know each other, of course, when Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay in 2020. And part of the reason that Tom went there was because of the work that John Spytek did there with Jason Light, building that roster through the draft. I mean, the Buccaneers, they don't really get much credit nationally, but they've been one of the better drafting teams in the NFL. And a big credit does go to John Spytek, and to the point that the third day of the draft, every single day of the draft, there's a press conference after with the GM and the head coach. The Buccaneers trust John Spytek so much. The last couple of years, they've been sending him out there to do the press conference for the third day and talk about their draft picks. So he has a lot of say with all their picks, go through their draft history this past year. A lot of success. Jalen McMillan, Bucky Irving, and a bunch of really good players who, again, we don't really talk much about the Buccaneers, but they've had a lot of homegrown players. When Brady went there in the first place, the reason he went there was because they had so many homegrown players from, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Vita Vea, and they drafted that year Antoine Winfield and Tristan Wirfs. They are a really, really good drafting team, and that all goes back to John Spytek and Jason Light. And John Spytek is somebody who has been in Tampa Bay for a long time. Before that, he was with John Elway in Denver and he won a Super Bowl. He's been with Andy Reid in Philadelphia. He has a lot of experience in many different buildings. In my mind, he was the #1 GM candidate this year, and he's gotten to know Tom Brady really well from the time when they were together in Tampa Bay, and also this year when Tom was with Fox. Before those games, which he did for the Buccaneers, I think he had 2 or 3 Buccaneers games on the field before the game. You would see Tom Brady talking to John Spytek on the field. So those two men are very close, and this was a Tom Brady hire in Las Vegas. The Raiders are going through their second head coaching interviews right now, and the plan now is to involve John Spytek in those interviews as well.
Is there a favorite right now for the head coach, or is Liam Cohen potentially in the mix with the Tampa Bay connection?
I never got the sense that Liam was somebody who's going to end up in Las Vegas. He obviously knows John Spytek. He is, as of right now, committed to going back to the Buccaneers under that extension. I think he's going to sign it today. Like I said before, the Jaguars are trying to make a final push over there. But I think right now the Raiders are looking at their division and they see Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh and Andy Reid, and they're like, we need to bring somebody over here who could basically go head to head with those guys. So they did interview guys like Steve Spagnuolo and Pete Carroll, who are veteran guys. I know Tom Brady has a lot of respect for those guys because he actually faced them in Super Bowls. So I don't really know exactly which direction they're going to go in. John Spytek will be involved in those interviews moving forward, but I've not really gotten the sense that Liam Cohen is going to be a candidate there. It looks like he's heading back to Tampa Bay as their offensive coordinator.
Is there any fire to the smoke of the idea that Bill Belichick could about face and bail from his college job and come back to the NFL all of a sudden in this cycle?
Well, Michael Lombardi, who I'm sure you guys have been checking out his Twitter account, he has been blowing up any person who brings that up, including myself, which I got a bit of an angry direct message.
Oh,
So he has made it he's made it very, very clear that he is not leaving UNC. And as of today, Bill Belichick officially signed his UNC contract. Up until now, there were no pen to paper. It was more of a binding agreement. So now they officially have that pen to paper agreement. He is there. He's recruiting. He's on the recruiting trail right now. It seems like he's enjoying it so far here in his first month. So I don't see it happening. It is true. Tom Brady did reach out to him just to see what's going on. It is true that Bill did reach out to the Jets before taking the UNC job. The Jets were like, hey, we're going to do a full search. We're not just going to hire you right now. So he realized, I'm going to go ahead and take this job. And I think the number one thing over here, the fact that he brought his son over from Jetfish in Washington, I don't think he's going to leave his son hanging and leave him there after taking him away from a really, really good spot at Washington. So I don't see him leaving right now from UNC.
But that contract that he signed, it just sort of gives them a buyout, right? Like it gives them money if he bails. Now, okay, the money is $10 million before June the 1st, but after June the 1st, it drops to $1 million. And does he actually leave his son hanging if he leaves, or does he automatically promote his son to the head coach if he leaves? Like, this could be the best nepotism boost that's ever been handed to anybody.
That is a good point. I just have a hard time seeing it happening right now. I mean, he has basically gone there. He's been there. He's been recruiting. He brought in Michael Lombardi. He's been hiring a staff. He's hired about 10, 15 people already onto the staff. It's hard to see him doing all of that and then leaving them hanging a month later. So I think he's going to go through this first year over here, see how it is, go through all of it. If he hates it, I think he'll be right back in the coaching cycle next year when it's much easier to get him. A $10 million buyout is not a lot, But for some NFL teams, Jerry Jones, that is a little bit too much. So I just don't see it happening right now.
All right, fair enough. Now, the most important question I have to ask you, Ari, if you've been a long-time listener to the show, and I'm sure you have been, we've been pushing Steve Palazzolo for general manager candidates across the NFL for years. So what are you hearing about Palazzolo's GM candidacy out there? Is he a finalist for any of these jobs? Are we going to get him in this year, or is he going to have to wait until next year's cycle?
Well, when the entire hiring cycle started after the season was over, there was only one GM job. It was the Jets, which they fired their GM during the season. So I was like, oh, Steve probably has no shot. But then, we started making some phone calls, and then the Titans were like, you know what? Rand Carthon, get out of here. And then
Right.
like a few days later, Tom Telesco, you get out of here. And now we get Trent Baalke, you get out of here. So I feel like some of these teams are realizing, you know what? There's some big time candidates out there, including Steve Palazzolo. So I'm not going to rule it out. I think you have a shot. It might not happen this year, but at some point, I feel like these teams are realizing a little bit too late that we should move on from our current guy and look what's out there.
Look at that, see? Never say never. So just keep listening. Keep listening, Ari. See if you hear my name. Let me know. I think I'm throwing the resume out for the Jags. Have to.
My ear is out there. My ear is out there. We'll see. Maybe the Jags get you involved. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
See, it was better than a no. Ari Meirov, NFL Spotlight. Go check that out. Follow him on Twitter. Appreciate it, Ari. Tell everybody else, where everybody can find all your stuff.
Yep, at My Sports Update on X or Twitter or whatever you call it these days. And the NFL Spotlight Show, we're on Monday to Friday. Every Tuesday we have a special spotlight guest, someone from the NFL who deserves more recognition, player, coach, executive, media person, whoever it is. Really, really good stuff there. So wherever you get your podcast and on my X feed.
Great. Thank you, Ari. We'll have you again very soon.
Thanks, Ari.
Anytime, my friends.
Appreciate Ari, of course, our colleague here at the 33rd team. As it's news season, we'll have a lot more of Ari here on Check the Mic.
New season.
It's also
season.
Start of the new year. It's still the new year. Perfect time to get organized, set goals, prioritize what matters most. For me, a top priority is that financial wellness, which feels more important than ever. So thanks to Rocket Money, my goals feel achievable. They show me all of my subscriptions right in one place and help me easily cancel ones that I forgot I've been paying for. In fact, we just learned that 85% of people have at least one paid subscription going unused every single month. And Rocket Money pulls together all my spending from all of my accounts so I can clearly track my spending habits and see where I can cut back. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money's dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all of your accounts. You can easily create a personalized budget with custom categories to help keep your spending on track. You can see your monthly spending trends in each category to know exactly where your money's going. You can get alerts if bills increase in price and if there's unusual spending activity, or if you're close to going over budget. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you. They automatically scan your bills to find opportunities to save. Then you can ask them to negotiate for you. They'll deal with customer service, so you don't have to. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/checkthemic today. That's rocketmoney.com/checkthemic. All right, man. Good to have Ari on the show. Like I said, I think as draft season, free agent season comes about here, we'll have a lot more from Ari.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were going to dither and cost us being first to stories, we need to have a guy like Ari in who can legitimately break news on the show.
He was slow to confirm my Cowboy story. It's always nice to have someone confirm the story. No text message.
I'm just saying, we have a legitimate insider here that can do the work if you're not going to be doing it. If you're going to be busy sending texts and confirming and, we're talking to sources.
We're 2 for 2. We're going to be 2 for 2 by the end of the day here. And at worst, it'll be 1 for 2. Still pretty good. Still pretty good.
Worst we could do is be 50-50.
All right. Shouty Show segment. We didn't get to do it yesterday, but we're going to wrap the show up with it today. And then I got to run home and talk to Jim Nagy about the Senior Bowl, which you guys will hear about next week. So let's talk. Let's see what we got from the Shouty Shows.
Let's go.
But unfortunately now, it's just depression. That's what it is being a Cowboy fan. It's utter depression and anger, and where the hell do I go from here? And a hire like this isn't getting even if it's Kellen Moore, maybe it's not Shouty. And I'm not trying to crap on him. Good dude, family's awesome. They walk by us all the time, Brian, in post games. Yeah. But this is an utterly crap hiring if that's what you're going to do. It's disgraceful, and it's a slap in the face to your fans. It's like you're doing a bit. Do you give a damn? The answer is no right now, you don't. You don't care about winning a championship, and all you care about is printing money.
Okay. That started slow, but it got into, it's like and then we got warmed up, we got lathered up, and we started, it's an insult, it's a slap in the face. It's, you got worked up by the end.
Slap in the face.
Yeah.
It is an interesting
That was
dynamic.
by Zach Walchuk, who apparently is at 105.3 The Fan as a radio host, presenter, whatever. Got to admit, don't know who he is, but
It's all right. We do now.
yeah.
No offense to Shouty, waiting on a text back anyway. But he's a surprise hire. He's a surprise even interview candidate, obviously. Right?
Well, surprise for anybody but Dallas. It's
Yes.
like, had anybody else been like, oh, it turns out Brian Schottenheimer's emerged as the favorite for the head coaching gig, you'd be like, ooh, that's a shock. For Dallas, it's like, yeah, that kind of figures.
It's like he could be a great coach. I don't know. He could be an outstanding head coaching hire. But it's like going to Fogo, ordering a salad.
It's like going to Fogo and ordering a salad.
It's just like it's a curveball, right? Like you're not going there for the salad. Dallas is just like we're gonna order off a different menu.
Well, it's more
We're
like
ordering from a different menu in Dallas right now.
every
And he
time.
could be good. He could be good. He could be a perfectly fine hire. Who the heck knows?
Right, but the starting point is from the other side of that, right? Normally, when we're looking at head coaching candidates, it's like Ben Johnson, right? Ben Johnson, the number one head coaching candidate this year and has been for like a couple of seasons. And then what you say is, well, look, all of the resume points are good. Everything on his resume right now is a positive. It's all good. That's why he's the number one candidate. On the other hand, we never know how they work out. Will he be a good head coach? Who knows? With Schottenheimer, it's almost the opposite. It's like, there's nothing here that says he'll be a good head coaching candidate. There's an absence of positive resume points, but he might be one because who knows? It's like it's the exact opposite of what you're normally dealing with like you're using the unknown quantity to justify his candidacy as opposed to saying his candidacy is good, but it might not work out because who knows? It's just the exact opposite of what the search normally is.
It is. It's just fence-sitting Steve, who probably was too critical of Dan Campbell. I'm just not going to play that game because we don't know. We don't really know.
But it does.
But all I'm saying is Dallas is ordering from a different menu. Is the whole point,
They're
right?
ordering from the cheap menu. That's the bottom line in all this, right? It's circling back to the strangeness of Jerry Jones is the one thing that characterizes his attitude as a general manager is being cheap in random areas, which makes no sense for a guy that has all the money in the world, is costing himself money actively by, dragging out Dak Prescott's contract, dragging out CeeDee Lamb's contract. Like, he's sort of deliberately burning through money in other areas where there's actually a restriction. Like he's in a closed system, like the salary cap, he's burning through money. And yet in an open system where there's no limit to how much money he could throw at it, he's like, 2 years? I don't know. Could you do one? It's like, what are we doing?
Tough to predict. Tough to predict Jerry. Or is it? All right, what else we got here?
I now have passionate opinions about this Ben Johnson guy. And I'm going to tell you right now, do not hire that man to be your head coach. I see that going as a disaster. I would love to have him back as the offensive coordinator after we sat him down and had a chat with him. But look, you call a pass, but it's not for your quarterback to throw the pass. It's for your receiver to throw the pass. Not just any receiver. The receiver that has shown us time and time again that in a league with George Pickens, it is he who has the worst judgment in the NFL. It is the one who tried to do a goddamn Pretty Ricky routine after he scored the touchdown on the reverse, and they had to get him to stop humping the ground. You entrusted a receiver with your season on the line. What kind of big brain bullshit was that?
All right, that part I think has some merit to it. The idea that of all the people, Jameson Williams' judgment, that's who you know.
And you have two choices. Throw it if it's open or throw it away.
In a binary decision-making process, I'm still not sure you want to be resting your entire season on Jameson Williams' judgment. If that play had been called, say, for Amon-Ra, right? If he'd been the guy with the ball in his hands making the 50-50 call, do you throw it? Do you throw it away? You call. I think you have a pretty good – I would trust him to make that decision correctly. And had he made that decision correctly, there's nothing wrong with the play call whatsoever. It's like literally nothing. Like they've made a season. We had a whole 10 minutes about this on the review show. it was actually a smart play design based off a play they'd already run, the one where Jameson Williams scored and then starts humping the field. Like, it's actually a good play call, but I do agree that there is some questionable decision-making allowing Jameson Williams to be the guy making that call.
Bomani Jones on the Shouty Show there.
Yeah.
I mean, the special part of that makes it Shouty Show is then projecting this one play call.
Right. This alone says that he can't be the head coach of the Bears.
Like, he will never have success as a future head coach because of this one play call. After a season of, if he called 25 trick plays, I mean, 18 of them were pretty legit. You know, they were pretty awesome.
To be fair and to remain consistent, I'm not above that. I have, for example, said that the thing that would steer me away from Jared Goff is the fact that he didn't know where the sun rose.
You're not afraid to be a one-issue voter.
Correct.
You're not afraid to be.
There are things that when I see them are so crazy that it will forever steer me away from that individual. I simply don't believe that this is bad enough. Like, I think you can make the argument that entrusting your season to Jameson Williams' decision-making is a mistake, right? I don't, however, believe it's such a prohibitive mistake that you go, that means you can't be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. There are things that he could do that would make me think that.
That's not one.
That isn't one of them.
That one play call is not
correct.
One. Yeah, so we're taking the play call a little bit too far there. All right, what's next here? Shouty Shows.
And I've had enough with Kelsey. I've had enough with the girlfriend. And now I got Caitlin Clark in the mix. I mean, I understand you want to be a fan because they win. That was tough to say. I am so cheaped out. It's ridiculous. And, you know, ESPN, they're going to be as guilty as everybody else. They're going to show you, Swift and her in that freaking press box until the cows come home. When Taylor Swift's Bob Dylan, come back and talk to me. Come back and talk to me. When she has that sort of impact. Not for the 18-year-old girls like my daughter. Come back. You can use Swifties, you can say anything you want. Come back and talk to me.
Is he saying she's no Bob Dylan?
I don't know, but he never took off. He kind of
I thought he was
got to the brink a couple of times and then walked back.
I'm just trying to watch the football game here, and you're showing the Swiftie and the Caitlin and the Mahomes, and I don't care.
Like he never got into fever pitch. It felt like he was getting there and then just backed off it every time. That was a bit disappointing from Mad Dog.
Did people get so worked up with Buckeye legend LeBron James the other day? Every time they showed him like 20 times during the game.
I don't know.
Like, I really care about LeBron and how he cares about his Buckeyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we'd get a little bit more out of Mad Dog there.
That was pretty disappointing from him.
Because he was worked up. He gets worked up over Christmas.
Anything. Literally anything.
Right? Christmas was driving him nuts.
Right.
I got the music and the presents and the day and the Christmas Eve. And, he was very upset about a lot of Christmas things last time we heard from him.
He gets very upset about everything. I'm actually amazed that he managed to walk himself back from the brink on this one.
Mad Dog, mildly upset with Taylor Swift. But she's no Bob Dylan. She's not a game changer like Bob Dylan.
No Bob Dylan. Do you see Dave Portnoy being upset about the Dylan movie because he found it basically unrealistic and impossible to believe that back in the day people got really upset about Bob Dylan using an electric guitar as opposed to an acoustic guitar, right? He thought that this was like such a ridiculous premise that it made the movie impossible to buy into. Seemingly unaware that that's exactly what happened. The world was simply so stupid back then in a different way that it's extremely stupid right now, that is actually a real thing that people were upset by. Like, that became one of the massive stories in the music industry, was this guy, this traitor, was using an electric guitar, and we can't have that. But to Dave Portnoy, that was just so unrealistic, the movie was terrible.
That reality was...
Right. Reality was too unbelievable for him
crazy
to take the movie seriously.
Oh, man. She's no Bob Dylan.
Mad Dog
Taylor
says
Swift.
Taylor Swift is no Bob Dylan. I mean, he's right. She isn't.
It's good. It's a good comparison, but he could have, that was Skip-like energy, though.
It's entirely accurate to say that she is not Bob Dylan.
She's definitely not Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
That's correct. Do we have one more, or is that it?
Final Shouty?
More than half of the league who the last time they thought they had a real chance to either win a championship or the best team they've had in years, that team's season was ended by Kansas City. The last great Bills team, how did that season end? The Chiefs. The last great Ravens team prior to 3 days ago, The Chiefs. The last time the Bengals made the playoffs, how'd that end? The Chiefs. The last really good Steelers team, how'd that season end? The Chiefs. You go to the NFC, obviously Eagles and Niners. And then, oh yeah, by the way, who did I not mention? Well, what are some big markets? The Bears? What's the Bears issue? Oh, yeah, they passed on Mahomes. What's the Cowboys issue? Oh, yeah, America's team, are we sure? So there is real direct, God dog it. Not only do I not like them, they beat me. And they beat a team that I believed in. The other thing is this. We have never seen a face of the league guy never have adversity. People are watching not because, like, oh, I hate watching the Chiefs. They are rooting really, really hard against them.
Nick must love this.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the Chiefs just endless winning, just nothing but W's, nothing but the next dynasty.
Because he can go on a limb and say all these confident things and just not get burnt by it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, see, I told you again, they're going to beat the Bills and they're going to beat the Eagles and they're going to beat everybody.
It is interesting.
But like, people watch the Patriots for 20 years.
Yeah.
The Patriots were the lovable underdog for 1 year. Year one,
The Rams year?
They were the lovable underdog. They came out as a team. Look at this. Patriots come they're a team. They're not just one person. They're a team. Look at this. And then after that, it's like, oh no, we're sick of it. By 3 years in, that's just normal human nature. You get sick of the dynasty.
Right. Ben wants us to acknowledge the dark screen that was on there for a while. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to keep on rolling. Nothing
I didn't
happened.
even notice.
Right. Nothing happened. It's interesting. I hated that Patriots dynasty team for the majority of it. Almost always I didn't like the way they played football. I didn't like the way they were winning these games. I was in the camp of most of America hating the successful team, right? I don't hate this Chiefs team the same. Like, I'm not saying I'm rooting for the three-peat, but I would respect the three-peat, like in a way that I think that that's a compelling story, along with the Jaden Daniels thing, along with Buffalo winning one finally. If Kansas City actually gets a three-peat and we get this insane run of Mahomes and Kelsey and Andy Reid just being able to go, boop, playoffs, better, and turning it on and just winning, I don't hate that as much as I did the Patriots dynasty, and I don't know why. I don't have a good reason for that.
You should respect it no matter what. I mean, obviously it's an impressive accomplishment.
Right, but it was impressive when the Patriots were doing either, and yet I hated it. Yeah. I don't have a good explanation for why I don't immediately, like, it's not rubbing me the wrong way the way that the Patriots thing did. Why am I not hating this absurd metronomic robotic success that they're having?
I don't know, but the similarities are like the one-off plays here and there that you could point to. There are a lot of similarities in that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what always makes it tough from an analysis perspective, because I know you could say one play here, one play there for any team throughout history, but the Chiefs team, again, like the Niners were a third down conversion away from winning the Super Bowl last year, right? The Eagles were a play or two away from winning the Super Bowl 2 years ago. The AFC Championship, the AFC Divisional, like every week they're a play or two away.
I mean, that's just the reality of football most of the time in the playoffs.
But but then over time things turn at some point, right? So like a Patriots hater could say, well, you're a couple plays away from having 2 Super Bowls. And a Patriots fan could say, they're a play away from having 10 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's
the
why
3 that they lost were one play here and one play there.
But it's why, like, plays have names, right? Like, it's why there's the catch is a thing, right?
Well, there's a helmet catch and there
these things like going back, it's why, the catch, Montana to Dwight Clark, is a thing, because that changed the narrative around the 49ers. They went from you can't get past Dallas to suddenly you're the team and you start a dynasty. It's why, the Holy Roller or the Immaculate Reception, like all these plays with names, like they have names because narratives swing on these individual plays that completely change the way we view X franchise for the next 5 years.
I think part of it too, though, is like Andy Reid is a more likable personality than Bill Belichick. Just the leader of the operation.
Yeah.
Like Andy's like, I just want cheeseburgers and Hawaiian shirts, and I call, and he's an offensive guy. I call cool plays, and I think that's probably part of it.
Yeah, maybe that's part of it. I mean, even Tom Brady was like a bland, amorphous non-personality for his entire career. Like, at least Mahomes is vaguely interesting as a human. Brady was just this androgynous, like, mannequin of a quarterback for 20 years, and everyone hated that.
He was a 6th round underdog, man.
Right, but there was no substance to him as a human for his entire career. You know what I mean? Like, you just got this, like, boring, banal, beige excellence, which is just not compelling.
beige and eventually pewter excellence when they moved. All right, man, that's a good Shouty Show segment. I mean, yeah, you're right. Nick Wright. I mean, it's fascinating to me that people want to, of course people want to watch Nick Wright's show. Just tune in to like the Kansas City fan tell you how good his team is, but that's what he does. They keep getting away with it. We'll have some more mailbag stuff as we go over these next few weeks. So we got conference championship preview. We did that today. We're going to review the games right after. So we're going to go live right after the games. So be with us. It's actually not Monday. It'll be Sunday night right after. Monday show is going to show up early, right after Chiefs Bills.
You going to have a working camera by then?
I'm going to use the one that we know will work. That will not just disappear. Apologies for all my technical issues. And the black screen with Nick Wright. Oops. Sunday. Oh, look at this. We're just live adding things.
There
Oops. Sunday night, live after the game. And then we're going to have a little Senior Bowl preview next week, get in some draft stuff, and behind the scenes, Senior Bowl, all sorts of fun stuff. We're heading out to Mobile on Monday.
Sunday night, we're gonna shatter our own record for most concurrent viewers. We're going to go for it. It's going to be a record. So here you go. Here's your warning. Sunday night, as soon as the games finish, what do? You fire up the YouTube.
Yes.
All right, check the mic. Instant reaction. It's going to be going live. Everyone's going to be sitting there, right? It's national television. It's the only game going. You're all sitting there watching it. As soon as it finishes, boom, we go live, and we get 1 million people concurrently.
Which is easier if you're already a subscriber. If you hit the thumbs up, you subscribe, you hit the bell.
I mean, look, like 30 million people are going to be watching the game. All we need is 1 in 30, and we've got 1 million people watching.
McAfee-like numbers. McAfee-like numbers Sunday after the game. Also, Sunday before the game, get into the Discord, Q&A, 2:15 Eastern, sharp. Sam and I will be in there getting you ready for Eagles Commanders. All right? Mm-hmm. That's it. That's it for us. Everybody enjoy the football. We'll see you again Sunday night with more. Check the mic.